I used to believe that if you worked hard, everything would be fine, that money problems only happened to careless people, that as long as you had a stable job, life would slowly get better. But what if that is not true? What if you can work hard every day and still slowly destroy your own financial life without even realizing it? Have you ever looked at your bank account and felt confused? You earn money, you are not lazy, you are not irresponsible, and yet somehow you are always behind. I remember the exact moment when everything started to feel wrong. I was 34 years old. I had a decent job. My friends thought I was doing well. My family believed I was stable. From the outside, my life looked normal. But inside, I was constantly worried. Every month felt like a quiet struggle, not a disaster, not a crisis, just a slow, uncomfortable pressure that never went away. And the worst part? I didn't know why. I didn't see any big mistakes. I didn't make any terrible decisions. At least, that's what I thought. But looking back now, I can clearly see the truth. I was making small mistakes, very small ones. The kind of mistakes that don't hurt immediately, the kind that feel harmless, the kind that almost everyone makes. And that is exactly why they are so dangerous, because they don't destroy your life in one moment. They do it slowly, quietly, day by day, year by year, until one day you wake up and realize you are stuck. Today, I want to tell you my story, not because I am proud of it, but because I wish someone had told me this earlier, because maybe you are making the same mistakes right now, and you don't even know it. Let me take you back to my early 30s. I had just received a salary increase. It wasn't a huge amount, but it felt important. For the first time, I thought, now my life will be easier. I still remember that feeling, that quiet excitement, that belief that things were finally changing. And in a way, they did change, but not in the way I expected. Instead of becoming more stable, I slowly became more dependent on money. At first, it was something small. I started eating out more often, not every day, just a little more than before. I told myself I deserved it. I worked hard. I was tired. I needed comfort. And food was the easiest comfort. Then came something else. I upgraded my phone. My old phone was still working fine. It was not broken. It was not slow. But the new one looked better, faster, more modern. And I thought, why not? It felt like a reward, a sign that I was moving forward in life, a small upgrade for a better version of myself. At least, that's how I explained it. Then came weekends. I started going out more. Coffee shops, restaurants, short trips. Nothing too expensive, nothing too crazy, just normal things. Things that everyone else was doing. And that was the problem. Because everything I did felt normal. Nothing felt like a mistake. Nothing felt dangerous. But slowly, my lifestyle began to grow. Not my income, my lifestyle. And I didn't notice it at first because the changes were small. So small that they felt invisible. But my money noticed. Every month I had a little less left. Not zero, just less. And I told myself, it's okay. I'm still fine. Until one day, something unexpected happened. My company reduced bonuses that year. It wasn't a big loss, but it was enough to make me uncomfortable. Because for the first time, I realized I was depending on money that was never guaranteed. And that was the beginning of my first real mistake. Not spending too much, not buying things, but something deeper, something more dangerous. I had built a life that needed a certain level of income to survive. And without that income, Everything started to feel unstable. That was the moment I should have stopped. That was the moment I should have asked myself, what am I doing? But I didn't, because nothing had collapsed yet. And when nothing collapses, we believe everything is under control. So I continued, month after month, year after year, making the same small choices, the same quiet decisions, the same invisible mistakes. And each time, I told myself the same story. It's just a small thing. It doesn't matter. I can fix it later. But here is the truth I learned too late. Small things matter the most because they repeat, because they become habits, because they shape your life without asking for permission. And before you realize it, they define who you are and where you are going. If I could go back in time, if I could talk to my younger self, I wouldn't tell him to work harder. I wouldn't tell him to earn more money. I would tell him something much simpler, something that sounds almost too small to matter, but changes everything. I would say, be careful with what feels normal, because normal is not always safe. Normal is not always right. And sometimes, normal is exactly what keeps you stuck. This was just the beginning. The first mistake didn't look like a mistake, it looked like progress, it felt like success, and that is why it was so dangerous. In the next part, I will tell you about the second mistake, the one that made everything worse, the one that I repeated again and again, even when I knew it was hurting me. And maybe, when you hear it, you will recognize it in your own life. The second mistake didn't begin with money. It began with a feeling, a quiet, uncomfortable feeling that I didn't want to face. After my lifestyle started to grow, after I became used to spending a little more, something inside me slowly changed. I started to compare, not in an obvious way, not in a loud, jealous way, but in a quiet, constant way. I would look at my friends, their clothes, their phones, their vacations, and I would think, they are doing better than me. Even if it wasn't true, even if I didn't know their real situation, the feeling was still there. And once that feeling enters your mind, it is very hard to remove. At first, I ignored it. I told myself, everyone has their own life. Don't compare. But I didn't realize something important. You don't need to believe a thought for it to affect your behavior, because slowly, without making any clear decision, I started to change the way I spent money, not because I needed things, but because I didn't want to feel left behind. That was the real reason, and I didn't even say it out loud. It was hidden, deep inside my thinking. For example, one of my friends bought a new watch. It was not extremely expensive, but it looked elegant, confident. When I saw it, I smiled. I said, "It looks great." But later that night, I went online just to look, just to check prices, just to understand the market. At least, that's what I told myself. A few days later, I bought one. Not the same one, but something similar. Something that made me feel a little more equal, a little more confident, a little less behind. And that feeling was addictive because it worked. For a short time, every time I bought something like that, I felt better, stronger, more successful, but only for a while. Then the feeling disappeared, and I needed something else, something new, something better. This is how the second mistake grows, not from need, but from emotion, from comparison, from the quiet fear that you are not enough. And the dangerous part? It looks completely normal because everyone around you is doing the same thing, upgrading, buying, showing, sharing. It becomes a silent competition, and no one talks about it. No one says, I bought this because I felt insecure. No one says, I spent money because I didn't feel good enough. Instead, we say, I deserved it. It's a reward. It's a small thing, but deep inside, we know the truth. At least, a part of us knows. I remember one moment very clearly. It was a weekend. I met a group of friends at a cafe. Everyone looked successful, nice clothes, new phones, confident smiles. We talked about work, about travel, about plans, and I noticed something. Every time someone shared something impressive, I felt a small pressure inside my chest. Not pain, just pressure. Like I needed to keep up, like I needed to prove something. But prove what? And to whom? That day, I went home and opened my banking app. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel in control. I felt tired, tired of trying to match a life that wasn't even real. Because here is the truth I learned later. You are not comparing your real life to other people's real lives. You are comparing your real life to their highlights, to their best moments, to the things they choose to show. And when you compare like that, you will always lose. Always. But instead of stopping, I made the mistake deeper. I continued spending, not because I had money, but because I wanted the feeling of being okay, the feeling of not falling behind. And slowly, my financial situation became weaker. Not suddenly, but quietly, like a slow leak. You don't notice it at first, until one day, you realize something is missing, and by then, it is already serious. If I could go back, if I could sit next to my younger self in that cafe, I would not tell him to stop buying things. I would tell him something more important. I would say, you don't need to win this game because it is not a real game. There is no finish line. There is no winner. Only people running and getting more tired. The second mistake was not about money. It was about identity, about how I saw myself and how I thought others saw me. And until you fix that, no amount of money will ever feel enough. This mistake stayed with me for years. It influenced almost every decision I made, every purchase, every upgrade, every small reward, and it pushed me further away from real financial stability. In the next part, I will tell you about the third mistake, the one that looks responsible, the one that makes you feel safe, but slowly traps you in a life where you are always working, but never moving forward. And this one is even more dangerous. The third mistake is the most confusing one because it doesn't feel like a mistake at all. In fact, it feels responsible. It feels safe. It feels like the right thing to do. And that is exactly why it is so dangerous. After a few years of spending more, after comparing myself to others, I started to feel something new. Fear. Not a strong fear, not panic, just a quiet thought in the back of my mind. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose my job? What if I don't have enough? And instead of facing my habits, instead of changing my lifestyle, I chose a different solution. I tried to feel safe as quickly as possible. And the easiest way to feel safe was to save money. So I started saving. At first, it felt good, very good. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. Every month, I moved a part of my salary into a savings account. I watched the number grow, slowly, steadily. And with every increase, I felt calmer, stronger, more prepared. I told myself, this is the right path. I am being responsible now. I am fixing my life. But there was something I didn't understand, something I completely ignored. Saving money is good, but saving alone is not enough. Because while I was saving, my life was not improving. My income was not growing. My skills were not changing. My thinking was still the same. I was still the same person, just with a slightly bigger savings account. And that created a hidden problem, a very dangerous one. I became comfortable, not truly secure, just comfortable enough to stop growing. I stopped asking questions. I stopped taking risks. I stopped looking for better opportunities because I had something that felt like protection, savings. But it was an illusion because my savings were small compared to my life. They could protect me for a short time, but not forever. And instead of building a stronger future, I was building a small wall and hiding behind it. I remember one moment clearly. My company offered a new position. It required learning new skills, taking on more responsibility, facing more pressure. It was not comfortable, but it also offered higher income, better long-term opportunities, a real chance to grow. And I said no, not because I couldn't do it, but because I was afraid, afraid of failing, afraid of stress, afraid of change. And in my mind, I had a perfect excuse. I don't need it. I already have some savings. I am okay. That sentence, I am okay. It sounds peaceful, but sometimes it is the most dangerous sentence you can believe because okay is where growth stops. Okay is where you stay the same. Okay is where years pass and nothing truly changes. While I was saying I am okay, life was moving forward. Prices were rising, opportunities were passing, time was disappearing, and I was standing still, slowly, quietly, falling behind. But I didn't feel it because nothing was breaking, nothing was collapsing. Everything looked stable. But stability without growth is just slow decline. And this is the trap. The third mistake is not saving money. The mistake is believing that saving alone will save you, that saving will fix a life that is not moving forward, that saving can replace growth. It cannot, because money is not just something you keep. It is something you must grow, not only in your bank account, but in your ability to create it, your skills, your thinking, in your courage. I didn't invest in those things. I only saved. And because of that, my future remained limited, even as my savings slowly increased. If I could go back, if I could speak to myself in that moment, I would say something very simple. Safety is not the same as progress because you can feel safe and still be stuck. You can feel comfortable and still be falling behind. The third mistake kept me in one place for years. It made me believe I was improving when I was actually just delaying the problem. And the longer I stayed there, the harder it became to change. Because comfort is addictive, even when it is quietly hurting you. In the next part, I will tell you about the fourth mistake, the one that finally started to break everything, the one that turned small problems into real consequences. And when that happened, I could no longer ignore the truth. The fourth mistake was different. It didn't feel small. It didn't feel harmless. This time, I knew something was wrong, but I still did it. And that is what made it dangerous in a new way. Before this moment, all my mistakes were quiet. They were easy to ignore, easy to explain, easy to justify. But now, I was starting to feel pressure, real pressure, not just a small discomfort, but a weight that stayed with me every day. It started with something simple, an unexpected expense. My laptop suddenly stopped working. I needed it for my job. I couldn't delay. I couldn't ignore it. So I had to replace it. At the same time, my rent increased, not a huge amount, but enough to make me think. And for the first time, my savings didn't feel like protection anymore. They felt small, too small. I remember sitting alone one night, looking at my numbers, my income, my expenses, my savings. And for the first time, everything became clear. I was not in control. I was surviving, barely. And instead of stopping, instead of reducing my lifestyle, instead of facing the truth, I made the fourth mistake. I borrowed. At first, it felt like a solution, a smart solution, a modern solution. After all, everyone borrows. Credit cards, installments. Buy now, pay later. It felt normal, and more importantly, it felt easy, too easy. I didn't need to change my life. I didn't need to feel uncomfortable. I didn't need to say no. I could simply continue and deal with the problem later. And that was the lie I believed. Later. But later always comes. And when it comes, it is usually heavier than you expect. The first time I used my credit card like that, I told myself it was temporary, just this once, just to handle the situation. But then something interesting happened. Nothing bad, nothing painful, no immediate consequence. And that made it easier to do it again, and again, and again. Slowly, borrowing became a habit, not for emergencies, but for comfort, for convenience, for things I didn't truly need. And the most dangerous part? I stopped feeling the cost. When you pay with cash, you feel it. When you see your money leaving, you think, you hesitate, you decide. But when you borrow, the pain disappears. And when the pain disappears, control disappears with it. I remember one moment that changed everything. I received my credit card statement. I had seen it many times before, but this time I looked carefully, very carefully, and I saw a number that made me stop breathing for a second. Not because it was impossible, but because it was real. It was not one big purchase. It was many small ones. Meals, clothes, online orders, small rewards, all combined into one truth. I had been spending money I didn't have for a long time, and now it was waiting for me, all at once. That night, I didn't sleep well, not because I was in danger yet, but because I could finally see the direction I was going. And it was not good. It was not stable. It was not safe. It was a slow fall, and I had been walking toward it for years. The fourth mistake is not borrowing money. Sometimes, borrowing is necessary. Sometimes it is useful. The real mistake is using borrowing to protect a lifestyle you cannot afford, to avoid difficult decisions, to delay reality. Because when you do that, you are not solving the problem. You are multiplying it quietly, slowly, and one day, it becomes too big to ignore. If I could go back to that moment, sitting alone with that statement in my hand, I would not tell myself to never borrow. I would say something else, something more honest. I would say, stop pretending everything is fine, because that was the real problem, not the money, not the debt, but the illusion. The story I kept telling myself, that I was in control, that I was responsible, that everything would work out. Without change, without sacrifice, without truth. The fourth mistake was the turning point, because from this moment, things could no longer stay hidden. Reality had started to appear. And once you see reality clearly, you cannot unsee it. In the next part, everything changes. This is where I finally face the truth, where I stop running, where I begin to understand not just what I did wrong, but what I needed to do next. And this part is the hardest one. There was a moment, a very quiet moment, when everything finally became clear. No noise, no drama, no sudden disaster, just truth. I was sitting alone early in the morning. No phone, no music, no distraction, just me and the life I had built. For years, I had been moving without thinking, spending without awareness, comparing without understanding, saving without growing, borrowing without control. And now, all those small decisions were standing in front of me, not as separate mistakes, but as one connected story, my story. And for the first time, I didn't try to explain it. I didn't try to justify it. I didn't say, it's not that bad. Everyone does this. I will fix it later. No. This time, I was honest. And honesty is uncomfortable because it removes all excuses. It shows you exactly where you are. And sometimes, that place is not where you want to be. I asked myself a simple question. If nothing changes, where will I be in 5 years? And the answer scared me. Not because something terrible would happen, but because nothing would change. I would still feel pressure, still feel behind, still feel tired, just older. That was the moment everything shifted. Not my money, my thinking. Because before that day, I believed something that many people believe. I believed that money problems are solved with more money, but that is not always true. Because if your habits stay the same, more money only makes the problem bigger. You don't fix the system, you feed it. And I had been feeding the wrong system for years, so I made a decision. A simple one, but not an easy one. I decided to stop lying to myself. That was the beginning. Not saving more, not earning more, not planning more, just honesty. I wrote everything down, every expense, every debt, every habit, not to judge myself, but to see clearly. And what I saw was not shocking. It was familiar, because deep inside, I already knew. I just didn't want to face it. Then I made my first real change. I stopped trying to look successful. That was harder than I expected, because it meant saying no. No to small upgrades, no to unnecessary spending, no to things that made me feel equal to others. And when you say no, you feel something. You feel uncomfortable. You feel different. You feel left behind. But that feeling is important because it means you are breaking a pattern that once controlled you. Then I did something else. I focused on growth, not fast growth, not dramatic change, just steady improvement. I started learning new skills, slowly, after work, on weekends, even when I felt tired, even when I didn't see immediate results, because I understood something new. The real security in life is not in your savings. It is in your ability to create value, to adapt, to learn, to grow. That is something no one can take from you. And slowly, very slowly, things began to change. Not in 1 month, not in 3 months, but over time. My expenses became clearer. My decisions became calmer. My confidence became real, not based on what I owned, but based on what I understood. And one day, I noticed something surprising. The pressure was gone, not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to feel stable. Not because I had a lot of money, but because I had control, real control. Looking back now, those 7 mistakes almost ruined my life. Not because they were big, but because they were repeated, quietly, without awareness. And if you are listening to this right now, there is something I want you to remember. You don't need to wait for a crisis. You don't need to hit the bottom. You don't need everything to fall apart to start changing. Sometimes, the best moment to change is when everything looks okay, because that is where the real danger hides in comfort, in routine, in normal life. So ask yourself today, what feels normal but shouldn't? What small habit am I ignoring? What story am I telling myself that is not true? You don't need to fix everything. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need one thing: awareness. Because once you see clearly, change becomes possible. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story made you think, if it felt familiar, if it helped you in any way, please take a moment to support this channel. Like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe for more slow English stories. Stories that are not just about language, but about life, and maybe about the quiet mistakes we all make before we finally learn to live better.